You're watching the second lesson on the cell. This lesson will focus on the plant cell rather than the animal cell. So in the previous lesson, we talked about what cells are, what single-celled organisms are called. They're called unicellular. What multicellular organisms are called. They're called multicellular. And we talked about the main organelles we see in animal cells. Plant cells have the same organelles, but they have also some extra different ones. So just a quick review. Life can be made up of one cell or many cells, right? Single-celled things are called unicellular, and the most common type is called bacteria. There's prokaryotes and eukaryotes. We talked about that in the previous video. And we also talk about the different organelles we find in our cells, the different parts that we find in our cells. So we know that the parts or the organs of cells are called organelles, and these 8 exist in all animal cells. They exist in all animal cells. So you have the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, the nucleus, the mitochondria, the vacuole, the endoplasmic reticulum, the ribosome, and the Golgi body. And so we mentioned what the cell membrane does. It's basically a big filter that lets good things in and keeps bad things out. We have the cytoplasm, which is the liquid inside the cell that holds everything together. The nucleus, which is the storage of all DNA in the cell. We have the mitochondria, which makes energy for the cell. We have the vacuole, which holds waste and food for the cell. So it's like a storage or a stomach area for the cell. And the animal cell can have more than one vacuole. We have the endoplasmic reticulum, which makes ribosomes. We have the ribosomes, which make proteins. We have the Golgi body, which is kind of like a huge mail or FedEx service where they put things in vesicles, which then get shipped out to where they need to go. So if food gets in there, the Golgi body will be like, that's food, put it in a vesicle, and send it to either the vacuole or the mitochondria to make energy. The plant cell has all of these things and more. And so we're going to talk about some of the differences you may notice. So the 3 big differences we see with a plant cell is that they also have 3 different organelles. They also have 3 different organelles. Now one of them may sound the exact same, we see vacuole, but it functions a little differently. So we have the cell wall in plant cells, this outer dark layer. We have the chloroplasts, which is this green organelle. And we have the vacuole, which is this large blob near the center. Right? So each of these things are different in a plant cell, and they don't exist, or they don't exist in the same way as they would in an animal cell. So why would plant cells need different organelles? Well, the reason why a plant cell would need different organelles is because plants need to do different things. They need to stay upright all the time, right? They need to collect light. And so doing these different things that not necessarily every other animal needs to do, for example, animals don't collect sunlight, they need different organelles, plants need different organelles to do those jobs. So here we have the cell wall, the first of the different organelles in the plant cell. So again, they still have the nucleus, the cell membrane, and all that stuff, but they also have a cell wall, which is found on the outside, this dark green of the cell. And so it surrounds the cell outside the cell membrane. This wall is made of a material called cellulose, and it protects the cell and gives it shape. So that's the main function of plant cells. They protect the cell and give it shape. And so this is why cells, or at least plant cells, have this weird sort of blocky shape. It's because of the cell wall being so rigid. It's a little flexible, but it's more rigid than just the cell membrane. Makes it look a bit more boxy or a bit more square. And so the cell membrane is on the inside of the cell wall, and the cell wall is on the outside to protect it and give it shape. Chloroplasts perform photosynthesis, right? Chloroplasts perform photosynthesis. And so they are the green organelles, so these green ones here, 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 and their job is to basically do photosynthesis. And so the reason why most plants are green is because they have chloroplasts. Those chloroplasts are filled with something called chlorophyll, which is a pigment that is green. Pigment is something that gives color. So if anything has a color, it has a certain pigment in it. And so the reason why plants are green is because they have the green pigment called chlorophyll. And so if you were to look at a plant, the green parts of plants typically are the ones that perform photosynthesis. So if you think of a tree, and you look at the greenest part of a tree, you probably notice that those are the leaves. And so you can assume that leaves are where photosynthesis takes place. So as per this drawing, some of these drawings here, photosynthesis, and I should probably erase that. Photosynthesis is the way plants create sugars, right? They take carbon dioxide, they take sunlight, they take water, and they make it into sugar, right? The waste they create mainly is oxygen. Now they do create some water, but that's when they use their sugar. So we're going to just focus on the fact that when they do photosynthesis, they take carbon dioxide, CO2, they take sunlight, they take water, and they turn it into sugar. And so what we get left with is mainly oxygen, right? And this all happens in the chloroplasts. This all happens in the chloroplasts. So this is how they make sugar, and this is how they make oxygen. And that oxygen is their waste, and that's why they release so much of it. The vacuole. Now, the vacuole plays a different role in plants. In plants, the vacuole is closer to the center, right? Close to the center, and is much larger. Its job is to hold sugar and mainly water. Its job is to hold mainly sugar and a lot of water. And so that's why they really only have one big vacuole, and it's found here. And so there's a reason why it has such a huge vacuole, is because as you fill this vacuole with water, the pressure starts to increase, right? Because you're putting more stuff in an area. And if you have more stuff or more force or more energy in an area, you increase its density and pressure. And so the water will start to push out, right? And as the water pushes out, it pushes on the inside of the cell wall. And so that makes the cell wall very straight, right? And very tough and very stiff. And so this also helps give the plant shape, right? If you think about underwatering a plant, what happens is there's not enough water in the vacuole to push against the cell wall. So then the cell wall sags a bit because there's not enough force pushing it to keep it straight. And so all the cells will start to become limp. And so the plant will then wilt. And so that's why plants wilt when you underwater them. The water in the vacuole pushing along the cell wall is not strong enough, or at least not there, to keep the cells taut or stiff. So different kinds of cells can come in different sizes, but usually they're very small. So why can't cells be very large, right? Now we did have that one exception where we had that 5 centimeter cell, but why can't plants have, why can't cells, single cell things, be as big as a person or an elephant? Well, the main reason is because cells cannot be too big because they need to take in food and remove waste, right? If a cell becomes bigger, it needs more food. But at the same time, to get that food into the cell to where it's needed, it has to travel further. And so it takes longer to get the food, and you need much, much more of it. And if you're big, you produce a lot of waste. And again, that waste takes longer to leave the cell because it has to travel further. And so waste will start building up faster than the cell can get rid of it. And so because waste starts building up, it can become poisonous, and food may take too long for it to travel through the cell and make it to where it's needed to be. and it needs even more food because it's so big. And so cells have to balance the speed of removing waste, the speed of bringing in food, and the amount of food and waste they produce or need. So as a cell gets bigger, it takes longer for food and waste to enter and leave. The cell also needs more food and makes more waste as it gets bigger. Eventually, the cell would not be able to keep up with those demands. And so very large cells don't actually exist very often because the cell can't keep up with all the things it needs to do, because it needs to do more the bigger it gets. Which is also why multicellular things came into existence, right? Because those cells can do their job at a very small size. They can all clump together to become something big, and they're all able to do that job just as fast. And so that's why multicellular things can get big and single cellular things can't. So this video will just quickly this slide will quickly review the parts of the plant cell. Please recognize what they look like. They'll look the same on a test, right? This circular thing typically is a nucleus. This big bubble, vacuole. And so the pictures will stay relatively consistent. You need to be able to recognize what they are and what they do. So thank you for watching, and see you next lesson.